So here we are, 9C, page 30, yet another way, the third way, to solve that we've learned so far to solve quadratic equations. So to review, in 9A, we learned to solve quadratics by factoring. In 9B, we learned to solve quadratics by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. And these are great, but they don't always work. You can't always find an AC factor. And the square root doesn't always work either. So there is a method, however, that will always work, and that is the quadratic formula, because you can always use the quadratic formula to solve for your roots. So this looks like a big mumbo jumbo, but it really is pretty easy when you break it down. You have to have your equation written, in standard form. So our x squared needs to come first, and it needs to be positive. Then the x term, and then finally the constant on the back end equal to 0. So you've got these three coefficients, two coefficients, a and b, and then the constant c. And you're going to use a, b, and c, and you're going to plug it in this hairy-looking formula. And your answers, your roots, are going to be, there's going to be two of them, which is why you have a plus and minus here, because when we have an equation that's got an exponent of 2 for the x, we're going to have two answers. And we are going to plug it in this formula, and we are going to solve for x. So let's do it. This guy's in standard form, and so we don't need to move anything around. All we need to do is identify our a, our b, and our c, and that's pretty easy. A is 2, b is 3, and c is -5. So when I write the quadratic formula, and I would suggest you write it until you memorize it, because if you don't write it down, you're going to have a hard time memorizing it. So x is equal to, and I'm going to use this, I'm going to say that this is the opposite of b. Instead of -b, this really means the opposite of whatever b is. So if b turns out to be negative, the opposite of a negative is a positive. So the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, this whole thing divided by 2 times a. So now we're ready to go plug this in, and we're going to get x equals -3. So what's the opposite of 3? -3, plus or minus the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 2 times -5, all divided by 2 times 2. There's the 2, and a is also 2. So now we need to go clean up the inside of this radical sign, and we're going to, of course, do this multiplication before we do subtraction using PEMDAS. So x is equal to -3 plus or minus, I'm going to leave the 9 alone for a minute, and -4 times 2 is -8, and -8 times -5 is a positive 40, all over 4. So now we're going to go clean this up a little bit more. X is equal to -3 plus or minus the square root of 49, all divided by 4. I'm kind of running out of room. You'll have a little bit better luck when you're doing it with a pencil than me with this big fat pen. But I'm going to kind of go up over here. So now I have two answers, and I need two answers. I need the positive of the square root of 49 and the negative of the square root of 49. So x is going to be equal to -3 plus 7, all that over 2, and x is also going to equal -3 minus 7, all that over 2. So that becomes x equals 4 over 2, which is 2, positive. And, wait, what did I do that? Oh, this is over 4, not 2, 4. So x is going to be equal to 1, sorry. And the second is going to be 10 over 4. Again, I don't know why I dropped the 4. Negative 10 over 4, which is negative 5 over 2. So these are my two solutions for the quadratic equation listed right here. 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. So that's the quadratic formula. I'm going to actually erase this so that I can have a little bit of space. Let me just erase this page so I can have a little bit of space to do the second example. So I'm going to write A is 3, B is 10, and C is 2, and they're all positive, which makes it kind of nice. So X is equal to, again, you need to memorize this formula. I'm going to go ahead and just fill in the values because I don't have a lot of space here. So the opposite of 10 is negative 10, plus or minus, there's my two answers, the square root of b squared, so 10 squared is 100, minus 4 times a times c. All of this is over 2 times 3, 2a, right there. So now we got to just go clean this up, and we got to do it without making a mistake. So here we go. That's 100 minus 24. 4 times 3 is 12, doubled is 24, and it's negative. All over 6, which is minus 10 plus or minus the square root of 76 over 6. And basically, this is your answer. So we can split it up, and because we don't, the 76 does not have a perfect square, and if we wanted to, we could hop on the calculator to get an exact answer, but there's no need to do that. So your two answers are x is equal to minus 10 plus the square root of 76 all over 6, and x is equal to minus 10 minus the square root of 76 over 6. Those are the answers. Let's do these other two examples before we end this video. Again, this is in standard form. That's the first thing I'm looking for. A is 3, B is negative 2, and C is positive 2. So x is equal to, again, reminding ourselves of the quadratic equation, minus b, the opposite of b, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'm going to go plug in my values. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Plus or minus b squared, negative 2 squared is a positive 4, minus 4 times 3 times 2, all over 2 times 3. Okay, let's keep going and cleaning this up. We get x is equal to 2 plus or minus, and that's 4 minus c, 12 doubled is 24, all over 6. X is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 20 over 6, and you should be seeing a red flag right about now because we cannot take the square root of a negative number, so there is no real number solution for this. When you get to algebra 2, you'll figure out what the imaginary solutions are, but for our purposes, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. One more. This guy's not in standard form, so we need to add 8x to both sides, and we need to write it in order. X squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 0. Identify A is 1, B is 8, and C is 16. Plugging it in the formula, we get the opposite of 8, which is negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 64, minus 4 times 1 times 16, all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. Well, that x does not have the fraction bar. Let's clean this guy up. We get minus 8 plus or minus 64 minus 64, all over 2. So we get x is equal to minus 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. The square root of 0 is 0. So our two solutions are minus 8 plus 0 over 2, which is minus 4, and minus 8 minus 0 over 2, which is negative 4. So we have two solutions, but they happen to be the same number. So you don't have to write it twice. You can just say x is equal to negative 4. Thanks for watching.